Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something interesting?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're going to tackle this whole idea of interest and how it plays into, actually getting stuff done,
Interesting.
right? Like, is being interested in something absolutely essential for getting it done? Or can we power through even if we're not exactly feeling inspired?
I think we've all been there.
Totally. And to help us unpack all of this, we're going to be looking at this YouTube video, Stop Being So Undisciplined, from the Learn English podcast channel.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the end of this deep dive, you'll walk away with some seriously solid strategies for staying motivated and productive. Even when those boring tasks just keep on coming,
I like it.
right? Okay, so I think we've all felt it.
Mm.
That feeling of being totally absorbed in something we love,
Right.
right? Time just kind of disappears.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like that flow state everyone talks about.
Exactly. Like for me, it's when I get lost in a good book, suddenly, bam, it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, wait, sleep is a thing too.
Haha. Been there. But why does that happen? What's actually going on in our brains when we hit that zone?
Right. That's the big question. Well, the YouTube video actually points to some really interesting research from Stanford University.
Oh, interesting. What did they find?
So they found that when we're genuinely interested in something, our brains release dopamine,
Dopamine. Okay.
which, as you probably know, makes us feel good, but
Mhm.
also enhances our focus and all that creative thinking stuff.
So it's like our brain is giving us a little reward for doing things we enjoy, and that, in turn, makes us more productive.
Exactly. Makes total sense.
Yeah,
Right.
it does. It's not just about feeling good, though, right? Dopamine has a big impact on our learning and creativity.
Yeah, totally. Strengthens those neural pathways related to all that good stuff. Like
Aren't
our brains are basically saying, hey, this is important. Let's make this easier to do again in the future.
Right, like creating a shortcut.
Totally. So we've got interest, which sparks dopamine. Dopamine boosts creativity. Seems like a pretty sweet deal so far.
So far, so good.
But I have a feeling there might be a catch, right?
There usually is.
Like we can't just chase those butterflies all day long and expect to just magically get everything done.
Yeah, that's where we run into the procrastination trap.
Oof, yes. The procrastination trap. I'll clean my room when I feel like it, or I'll start that project when inspiration strikes.
Classic line.
Oh, I know those lines way too well. It's like waiting for a unicorn to deliver a package. It could happen, but honestly, you're probably better off with, a more reliable delivery service.
Yeah, much better. So then, how do we actually escape that trap?
Right. Well, the YouTube video suggests shifting our focus. So instead of just relying on interest, we need to tap into something a bit more stable.
Purpose.
Purpose. Okay, I like it. Right. So it's not just about waiting for that spark of interest. It's about finding a deeper, solid reason to take action.
Makes sense. Can you expand on that a bit more?
Sure. So this is where something called self-determination theory comes in. Basically, it's this psychological framework suggesting that we're way more motivated and likely to actually stick with something when we feel a sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness to the task at hand.
Okay, that's a lot of big words. Break that down for me. What do those things actually mean when we're talking about motivation?
Okay, great question. So autonomy is all about feeling like you have a choice in what you're doing and like you're in control. Competence is about feeling capable and confident that you can actually do it well. And relatedness is that feeling of being connected to something bigger than yourself, like maybe a community or a cause that you really care about.
So you're not just forcing ourselves to do something we absolutely hate. It's more about finding a way to link it back to our values or goals and, finding a way to actually feel good about doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that example they used in the YouTube video about studying for a test. If you can connect it to your dream of becoming a doctor, suddenly those late night study sessions don't feel so bad.
Makes a huge difference.
Totally. So when we see how our efforts are contributing to something we actually care about, even the most boring, mundane tasks can take on a whole new meaning.
That's powerful.
Okay, so we've got interest, our sometimes fickle friend, and then we have purpose, our more stable guide. But there's got to be something else in the mix, right?
I think so.
What happens when both interest and purpose decide to take a vacation at the same time? What keeps us going then?
Well, that's where discipline comes in.
Discipline.
Yeah, think of it as your reliable backup for when the other two are out of commission. It's about building the habit of showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it.
That sounds, well, a little less exciting than dopamine rushes and grand purposes.
Mhm.
Is discipline really the key to success?
Discipline isn't always glamorous, but it's definitely powerful. It's all about building those small, consistent actions that eventually lead to bigger results. The YouTube video makes this great analogy with brushing your teeth. We don't usually jump for joy about brushing our teeth, but we do it every day because we know it's important.
Right.
It's about building that consistency.
I see your point. It's like that whole compound effect thing, right?
Yeah.
Small actions taken consistently over time lead to remarkable outcomes.
Hmm.
It's not always about those big, flashy efforts. It's about showing up day after day and putting in the work.
Exactly.
But speaking of putting in the work, how do we find that balance between like the daily grind
Yeah.
and actually enjoying ourselves? The video mentions we don't have to turn into robots, right?
For sure. In fact, finding that balance between our responsibilities and the things we're actually passionate about can really boost our productivity and creativity.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Stanford University did a study on this and found that people who include leisure time in their schedules are actually more likely to come up with innovative ideas and solutions at work.
Wow. So burnout is not the path to success. It's like that saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, or in our case,
Yep.
a less productive one.
Exactly.
So how do we actually find that balance?
Yeah. Well, the video suggests a pretty simple but effective technique called time blocking.
Okay, time blocking.
Yeah. Basically, you divide your day into chunks for different activities: work, hobbies, rest, and so on. It's about being intentional with how you allocate your time, making sure you're making space for both those must-dos and the things that bring you joy and inspiration.
So it's not about just waiting for free time to magically appear. It's about actually carving out that time for ourselves and creating a schedule that supports both work and play.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, this is all great stuff. But I'm curious, what about those tasks that are just plain boring? How do we handle those?
Oh, yeah, we've all got those. Let's dive into that next.
All right, let's be real for a sec. Some tasks are just, boring, like laundry. Anyone else feel me?
Oh, 100%. Laundry is definitely up there on the list of not so fun things.
Right. But even those, like, everyday chores that we tend to dread, maybe we can make them a little less, I don't know, painful.
Maybe. What did you have in mind?
Well, the YouTube video we're looking at today actually has some pretty interesting tips. One of them was gamify.
Gamify.
Yeah, so it might sound kind of silly, but turning those chores into a game can actually work. Like, challenge yourself to fold the laundry as fast as you can, or see how many dishes you can wash in like 5 minutes.
I can see that. A little friendly competition with yourself.
Exactly. It taps into that, competitive spirit we all have. And even if you don't win every time, you're still making progress, which is what matters, right?
Totally. Small wins.
So besides turning chores into a game, what else did the video suggest?
Well, another good one is to pair those mundane tasks with something you actually enjoy, like listening to music or a podcast.
The classic multitasking strategy. That's a good one. I've gotten through so many piles of dishes thanks to a good podcast.
It's all about finding those ways to make those, necessary but not so thrilling tasks a bit more bearable. But sometimes it's not even about, those external tricks. It's about shifting our mindset.
Oh, okay. How do we do that?
Well, what if instead of seeing those tasks as a burden, we thought of them as opportunities to practice, like focus or efficiency?
I like that. Like, each task you finish is a little victory, a chance to hone those skills.
Right. And speaking of small victories leading to bigger wins, remember that study from Duke University? It found that a lot of high achievers actually attribute their success to strong habits and routines.
Right, so it's not always about those big bursts of inspiration, but about, consistency, showing up and doing the work, even when it's not super glamorous.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to discipline. It's like brushing our teeth. We don't usually get super excited about it, but we do it every day because we know it matters for our long-term health.
Right. It's about those small, consistent habits that add up over time.
Exactly. The compound effect in action. Those small actions, repeated consistently, can create massive change in our lives.
So how can we apply this to our everyday lives? What's like a small but impactful habit that we could start cultivating, like today?
Here's a question for you. What's one skill you could spend just 10 minutes a day learning? Imagine the progress you could make in a year.
Whoa, that's a good point. It's so easy to get overwhelmed thinking about making big changes, but even dedicating a small chunk of time each day can have a huge impact.
It really can. It's about embracing that power of consistency, realizing that those small steps, taken consistently, can lead us to some pretty incredible places. We don't have to be controlled by, how interested we feel at any given moment. to accomplish your goals.
I love that. So empowering. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from dopamine and interest to purpose and discipline, and even some hacks for making those must-do tasks a bit more bearable.
Nice.
What would you say is the most valuable takeaway here?
For me, it's that reminder that we have more control over our motivation and productivity than we think. We don't have to be ruled by our, ever-changing feelings. By tapping into our purpose, building discipline, and finding those creative ways to make even the mundane stuff meaningful, we can build a life that's both fulfilling and productive.
Absolutely. It's been so insightful exploring all of these ideas with you. And for everyone listening, I hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and maybe inspired you to take charge of your own daily routine. What about you? Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah. Remember, there's no one right way to do this. Experiment, play around, and find what works for you. And, don't forget to be kind to yourself along the way.
Love that. Okay, so before we sign off, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you the most? What strategies are you excited to try out? Share your thoughts, keep the conversation going, and we'll see you next time. Okay, so we've talked about finding that balance, passions and responsibilities, making even the boring stuff a bit more bearable. But how do we actually put all this into practice? Like, if we could design our ideal day, what would that blend of, fulfilling stuff and got-to-do stuff look like?
That's the question, isn't it? And to be honest, there's no single answer that works for everyone. Everyone's ideal day is going to be a bit different.
True, true. But maybe there's some, guiding principles we can use to help us create a schedule that works for us.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. One thing that stuck with me from that YouTube video was that idea of, aligning our tasks with our values and goals. If we can connect even those mundane chores to something bigger, something we truly care about, it totally changes the game.
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you really value spending quality time with family, but you also have that, mountain of laundry to tackle every week. Instead of seeing it as a chore, what if you looked at it as an act of love? Like you're creating this clean, comfortable space for your family to enjoy.
I like that, shifting our perspective and finding that deeper meaning even in those, everyday tasks.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, it's not about being perfect. There will be days when things don't go according to plan, and that's totally fine. The key is to keep experimenting and, refining your approach until you find what works best for you.
So we've covered so much in this deep dive, from the dopamine rush of our passions to the importance of purpose and discipline, and even some cool tips for making those must-dos a bit easier. What stands out to you as the most valuable takeaway?
For me, it's that reminder that we have way more control over our motivation and productivity than we often think. We don't have to just be swept away by our, ever-changing feelings. By tapping into our purpose and, building that discipline and getting creative with how we approach even the mundane stuff, we can actually create a life that's both fulfilling and productive.
I totally agree. It's been amazing exploring all these ideas with you. And for everyone listening out there, I hope this deep dive has given you some fresh ideas and maybe even inspired you to take charge of your own routine. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, just remember, there's no one right way to do this. So, play around, experiment with different approaches, and find what works best for you. And most importantly, be kind to yourself throughout the process.
Beautifully said. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing such insightful perspectives.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you tuning in, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. Remember to keep those questions coming, stay curious, and keep striving for that fulfilling and productive life. We'll see you next time.